Good morning and welcome to the Capital Gang. I am Oscar Semoyamsoki. In the studio, I have a first-time visitor, Mr. Henry Mutebe. Is that the way to say it?
Yes, Mutebe Henry.
Mutebe Henry, Mr. Henry Mutebe. Glad to have you here.
Thank you, Oscar.
I invited you because we've had the World AIDS Day on the 1st of December. So you're most welcome to the Capital Gang.
Thank you, Oscar, and I'm happy to be joining the great gang.
Derek Wandera, back on gang. We glad to have you back. Good morning.
Good morning, Oscar, and I'm happy to be back.
Yes, you must have been on the campaign trail.
Yeah. It's been quite a busy time.
Benjamin Katana, you're most welcome to gang. We missed you last week. You sent George Musisi. We told him we're not happy with him. He should leave Semujo alone. We had a chance to tell him.
Ugandans have been complaining that serious people are not showing interest in politics. When serious people show interest in politics,
they say no. Show interest where the serious people are needed.
But it's always a pleasure to be part of this show, Oscar.
Yes.
And I'm glad to join these distinguished citizens.
And in the studio, we have a guest, Professor Ogenga Otunu. You know, I only know one Ogenga Latigo. Now I know a second Ogenga.
And only one Otunu.
And only one Otunu. But it looks like Ogenga goes with Professor because the other one is also Professor. So you're most welcome to the Capital Gang, Professor Ogenga Otunu.
Thank you very much, Oscar. And hello to the panelists and to the audience listening from wherever you are. Greetings.
Yes. So what do you do, Professor Ogenga Otunu? You actually do speak like the other Otunu, Olara Otunu. So when people say we have Otunu, they might mistake you for Olara Otunu.
Actually, if my recollection is correct, this is the third time I'm appearing on this show. And by accident of history, it happens that Ambassador Olara Otunu is my older brother. And by accident of history, again, both of us happen to have been guild presidents at Makerere University.
Right.
I'm glad to be here. And
what is not accidental? Right now, what are you doing?
I am a professor at DePaul University in Chicago, where I teach contemporary global issues, international development issues, African history, Africa and the Black diaspora as well.
Yeah. And you have 2 books.
I have 2 books on Uganda. The title is Crisis of Legitimacy and Political Violence in Uganda, 1890 to 1979. And then the second one is the same title. The period is 1979 to 2016. And the books came out largely as part of my PhD dissertation, which was externally supervised by the late Professor Ali Mazrui. And so those are the 2 books on Uganda.
Yes. Glad to have you here, and I hope you have answers about that violence and politics in Uganda at the moment.
Thank you. I'll share what I know about it, and I can see a lot of distinguished colleagues here who might have better ideas than I do on the subject.
Okay. So Star Cafe is also here. Thank you, Star Cafe, for powering the Capital Gang. And so is Honorable Emmanuel Lumala Dombo. You're most welcome to Gang.
Fresh from disrupting our rallies in Amuru and Noya.
So I'm going to give you some time to first attack Star Cafe because it has been missing you. And then we'll get back to you. So Mr. Mutebe, Henry Mutebe, 15 years experience on program design, resource mobilization, advisory services across sub-Saharan Africa. You are very knowledgeable regarding HIV, AIDS, TB, malaria, and reproductive health. And yet you still look like a young man.
Thank you, Oscar. Yes, I've been in this space for some time. I'm 39 years old, so I've been around for some time. Yes.
Well, we're glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Younger than that, huh? He knows how to keep himself. By the way, Henry Mutebe is my OB. Yeah, from Kira College Boutique.
I'll not say whether you went to school late or...
Not the same class. He's certainly...
okay.
Yeah, he's certainly above me. Several years.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't
But
sure.
you look older now.
Tear gas of the government.
So we had the World AIDS Day. 1st December, it's an annual day recognition of people with HIV and AIDS and those people who passed on. What is it still a relevant day?
Yes, thank you, Oscar, for asking that question. Yes, on 1st of December, Uganda joined the rest of the world to commemorate the World AIDS Day. And it's interesting and a good question because I think because of either information fatigue or because the face of HIV has changed, a lot of people think that HIV has gone away. But what we know, for example, globally, we know that about 39 million people are living with HIV. Last year alone, 39
million people.
Yes, across the world.
That's nearly the whole of Uganda.
Absolutely. And last year alone, 2024, we had, according to records from the UNAIDS, 1.3 million new infections. And unfortunately, a lot of those new infections are happening in sub-Saharan Africa. And if we bring it home to Uganda, currently we have 1.5 million people who are living with HIV. And out of those 1.5, only about 1.3 are on treatment. So HIV is very much around. It has only changed the face. I think the young people today who did not see, the face of the scourge in the 90s probably have a different idea, but HIV is still around. It is very rampant, and unfortunately now it has a gendered face. Out of the 1.5 million people who are living with HIV, 930,000 are women. The men are about 570,000, and I'm talking about 15 to 49-year-olds.
What's the explanation for this?
There are quite a number of reasons why the HIV has that gendered face. One, of course, there are biological reasons. Women are more susceptible to HIV than men. The chances that if a male who is positive sleeps with a female, the chances are double that the woman will get HIV than if it's the other way around. And the reason is, one, for example, we know that the anatomy, physiologically, a woman has a larger surface area in the cervix that can be exposed to semen. Semen has more viral load than, for example, the vaginal fluids. But also in, for example, sexual acts between older men and young girls, sometimes the cervix is still young, immature, and there are wears and tears. Sometimes women have STIs which are untreated. So all that biologically makes women more susceptible to HIV. But also there are other structural issues. For example, power relations. You have women who cannot negotiate safe sex. Women cannot negotiate monogamy. Sometimes they're exposed to violence. And so all those compound the risk across the genders. So in Uganda, but unfortunately, actually, when you go down to, for example, last year in Uganda, we had 37,000 new infections. 37. After all the 40 years of programming around HIV, we still have 37,000 new infections, 2024. But if you break it down, out of those 37,000, 21,000 are women. And then about 11,000 are men. So women are still double.
How is this information collected?
There's means of...
And the reason I ask this is perhaps your figures are low.
Yeah.
Perhaps there are some people you've not captured in those numbers.
Yeah, I think that you for all the failures of this government, sorry to say that, I think that one of the areas where...
you're not looking at Emmanuel Dombo.
No, they've been successful. Every government has its own failures, so it's said in good faith.
Even individuals.
Absolutely. So one of the areas that this country has been successful is in HIV, in the HIV response. There are very robust systems and structures in place and policies to detect, to test, treat, and link people who are living with HIV. And I can say that with confidence. This data is validated by WHO, it's validated by UNAIDS and many other development partners who have deployed a lot of science to ensure that we are getting the data right. So it's one of the areas where you can be sure that the data is correct. But I was talking about the issue of women and men. Out of the 37,000 infections, 21 were women, about 11,000 were men. But again, if you break it down to 15-year-olds, so 24, because that's a very special age you want to track because they are sexually active, they're in their reproductive age. Out of the 37,000 new infections last year, 14,000 were people, young people between the age of 15 to 24. But again, out of those, 11,000 were young girls, adolescents and young girls.
You just said something there that 15-year-olds are sexually active?
Yes, sexually active. And then their reproductive age, so they are at risk, and so you want to track that particular age group to find out what's happening to them. So I've said that 15-year-olds, 15 to 24, were 14,000 out of the new infections, but out of those 14, 11,000 are young girls and young women between the age of 15 to 24. So that tells you again the gendered face of the epidemic in Uganda. And if you break it down, just to even make it worse, if you look at the 10-year-olds to 19, out of those 37,000, 6,000 were between the age of 10 to 19. But sadly, out of those 6,000, 5,500 are girls. And the boys are just 500. I mean, I don't say just to wish that they were more, but just it shows you that the trajectory it's taking.
I want to talk about treatment in a few minutes, but then what about children that were born with HIV? Because I think right now there are measures that would help one to bear a child without HIV, but this is relatively new.
Right now, so as I said that out of the 1.5 million people living with HIV, 71,000 are children. Those are 14 and below. So unfortunately,
71,000.
Yes, 71,000 are children between 0 and 14.
So that means those ones are going to have a lifetime of medication.
Absolutely. And when you look at, for example, the government has been again very successful with PMTCT. For example, out of last year, the government of Uganda averted about 20,000 new infections that could have resulted from mother-to-child transmission. So right now, the data we have shows that 99% of pregnant women who are tested, right now, if a woman is pregnant and she goes for antenatal care, it's a must that they are tested for HIV.
Okay.
So once they are detected, they are immediately, because of the test and treat policy, they are immediately enrolled for ART. But unfortunately, because there are certain subgroups within that population that have different issues that affect adherence, we had 4,700 children who unfortunately seroconverted, meaning that they were born, they acquired the virus from their mothers. This is largely due to issues around late pregnancy, when women are at that stage, or during breastfeeding, or those who abandon treatment. Because the moment, we've advanced so well that if we have what they call the U equals U, meaning if it's undetectable, it's untransmittable. And the strategy, the global strategy is 95, 95, 95, meaning that we want to know how many of all the people who are living with HIV, we want 95% of them to know that they are living with HIV, that they are positive. Then out of those 95, we want 95% of them linked to care. They start on ART. They start receiving their treatment. And then out of those who are on treatment, 95% must suppress their viral load. So that's the strategy, that you test, you treat, and ensure they are suppressing. Because once they are suppressing, they do not transmit. And that's why this country has been very successful with prevention, because now we have a lot of people who are virally suppressed. And Uganda has made very good progress on that. 95. We are at 94. At least 94% of people who are living with HIV in Uganda know their status. Now, out of those 94, 90% are on treatment. That's the 1.3 million people. And then out of those 90 who are on treatment, 96% are suppressing. Now, it varies between the genders. Women, obviously, because of their better health-seeking behavior, are suppressing more than the men. But we have issues around suppression for children who are between 15 to 24. Because for the first time, we have children who are born with HIV. Now they have come of age, they have their sexual and emotional needs. They don't want to come out and say either I'm positive. So, and we have stigma. We still have a lot of stigma with us. And unfortunately, the science can make the medicine, but it is the communities that give courage to persons living with HIV to take their medicine. So because of stigma, a lot of young people...
And then we go to treatment. So what kind of ART? In the past, someone would be swallowing a bag of pills every day. Has that improved?
Unfortunately, there's a lot of science that is a lot of research around improving treatment. Of course, in the past, there was a lot of people used to take a lot of, tablets, but it's been reducing. Still, people take drugs every day, unfortunately. But there's a lot of advances that are being made to find ways of ensuring that people are not fatigued with the drugs, and that maybe we even advance towards a cure. But as of now, as long as you are found to be positive, you are enrolled on.
Suppress, you need to be taking daily dose.
And in order to suppress, you have to consistently swallow, take your medicines every day, eat well, stay well, and ensure that you again not overexposing yourself to HIV.
I mean, you could say that of any illness: eat well, sleep well,
absolutely,
and exercise, and so on.
Absolutely.
Now, with the exit of USAID, has that affected treatments in Uganda?
I would say yes and no. Yes, because unfortunately the funding landscape for global health is really changing. Because of the priorities in the global north, there are issues around the policy shifts in the US government. Europe has its own issues: immigration, climate change, the war in Ukraine. So people are really rethinking their contributions to the global health envelope. But what we've observed in Uganda is that that we spend about 2.3 trillion on HIV. To maintain one person on HIV for a year, we spend 1 million shillings. That's just on treatment. Don't talk about prevention. That's 1 million shillings. So if we have right now 1.3 million people on treatment, that gives you roughly the figures. About 1.3 trillion now.
And if I don't have that 1 million, what happens? Is there a place I can find that free medication?
No, that right now the ARVs are free. It's government of Uganda. All the ARVs are free. So these are being provided. But sadly, when you look at the need, we have about we need about 2.3 trillion. But the health budget is 80% funded by external partners. So when, for example, the US government cut down, because of the executive orders, cut down on funding, we had 3,000 facilities that were providing HIV testing, PMTCT services closed. We had 29,000 workers sent home because of the closing of USAID. So there's a lot of need to actually change the funding architecture for the HIV response. You need to unlock domestic resources, because you can see what can happen. For example, where I sit, I work as a technical advisor for the country coordinating mechanism for Global Fund. Global Fund gives about $600 million towards the government of Uganda response to HIV. But because the US contributes about 30% of the resources to the Global Fund envelope, even for Global Fund, when there was a shift in the USA, the Global Fund reduced on the allocations for Uganda. For example, out of the about $240 million the Global Fund gives Uganda for HIV, we cut by about $30 million. That's about over 100 billion. So it meant, and this money is for commodities. 80% of Global Fund money is commodities. But also the government also stepped up, and we want to credit it. They stepped up. There was a supplemental, I think, that was provided, and so even when that funding cut came, at least we didn't have any stock out of essential medicines. There was continuity of care, except that the prevention arm of the response was greatly affected.
Yes, I wanted to ask about that. PEP.
Yeah.
PEP.
Yeah, because
that's
okay. PEP is the pre-exposure prophylaxis, but what I meant was that a lot of, for example, the response is supported by the work of civil society organizations. You have a lot of people who have come out, formed civil society organizations, networks of people living with HIV. They are very important to the response. It is these people that encourage others to take their medicine. They link up with them, they support them, because adherence is so important. And most of these have largely been supported through USAID programs and the like. So when that funding was cut, we had the ones they call expert clients who are living with HIV and know that people in that community, even when someone fails to come for their refill, they go and say, please, for the sake of your children, let's keep going. Because there's a lot of fatigue around taking drugs. So, unfortunately,
there were some clever people in Kenya or Uganda-Kenya borders and islands that had created drones to deliver medicines. Do they still work?
Yes, there are a lot of innovations on ensuring that we achieve last mile delivery of these commodities. Again, on this one, you want to credit the government of Uganda has been on spot when it comes to delivering.
The way Dombo is smiling today.
He must be smiling. We need to give him his flowers. So on HIV, I think we are doing well. There's still a lot of gaps.
Those are the gains.
Especially around.
Compare us with some countries.
Oh yeah. For example, when you look at the region, Kenya, prevalence of HIV is 3.3%. For us, we are at 4.9%. So for every 100 Ugandans you find, if you randomly tested, about 5 of them will be positive.
And for Kenya,
it will be 3 or 4. I think for them, they've been very... Kenya, let me just give you the data. South Africa is about 18 to 19 prevalence. It's quite high, yes.
It's quite high.
Lesotho, Eswatini, those are very high, 25, 28%. And I think where we've been successful is that in the 90s, when the president came out very strong with the fast track initiative, HIV, and it was open, we opened up very early. People came out and people got the courage and they received the treatment. So in some of those countries, people took long to recognize that, we need to be honest. But also what has happened in countries like Botswana, where they've driven the prevalence very low and have actually achieved the 95 targets, is they've also dealt with this question of key populations. Because when you look at the epidemic in Uganda, it is mostly concentrated among sex workers, men who have sex with men, the trans, truck drivers, and people that use drugs. That's where the challenge is. For example, amongst the sex workers, while the general prevalence within the general population is about 4.9, amongst a survey that was done, I think, in 2023 showed that female sex workers' prevalence was about 30% in this town. And unfortunately, the viral load suppression within that subgroup was below 36%. So you have a high concentration of the virus in this subgroup, but also the viral load is low. So it means they are transmitting. So then you have still, even among men who have sex with men, it's over 20%.
But How do you track that? Because in Uganda that is illegal.
Absolutely.
You will not have someone saying, I am sleeping with men.
Now, that's the thing.
There are not very many.
Now, that's the thing. I'll give you, someone once told me that, a snake handler told me that, that when you see a snake in the house, don't jump, because most likely it has been there for a long time. It's just that today it made a mistake. It miscalculated. That's why you've seen it. But a snake will always be there. It will not harm you. So if you jump around, and it can easily bite you. And I think in the same way, this is what has happened with the epidemic, that we have HIV.
I like that example.
Yeah, because once it feels irritated, that it senses that you're going to, if you, the whole more around it is that if you handle the situation poorly, you get a problem. So if right now we realize that there's a snake in our midst, maybe my friend Wandera here, being a footballer, will want to scramble and run out. Maybe Mr. Dombo here, being a man who loves handling issues, may want to beat it. But the snake has been here. We've been here for a couple of minutes. It didn't bite us. So you need, even when you are tense, and there's these men who have sex with men, sex workers, all these subpopulations which we have a problem with, it is important to know how to handle them, because every person that is left behind becomes the new source of the new transmission. So the way it works is that the Global Fund, for example, provides money to the government of Uganda, but it also provides money to civil society organizations that then reach out to some of these groups and communities. So there, for example, there's an association of sex workers in this country. They can be reached. There are communities of men who have sex with men, that trans. They are not formal structures because of the restrictive legal environment, but they are there and they are reachable, and even government is actually reaching and providing them with services.
So finally, from you, Henry Mutebe,
sure.
We have at least two politicians here. What do you want to tell them? We have NUP and NRM in the studio.
Yes.
For once, in where they are calm, this is a space where I enable them to be calm. And talk to each other. Yes,
I think my call to the politicians is to recognize that investment in health is not just an expense; it's an investment. There is already research that shows that for every $1 you invest in, for example, in the HIV response, the return on that investment is $3 to $4. So we call upon the politicians in the spaces where they sit to hear and allocate resources to the response. There is and if you have 1.5 million people who are sick, it means that you're going to continuously over the next couple of years lose 2.4 trillion that you would dedicate to your UPE budget or something like that. And for example, we know, for example, that the more children stay in school, the chances of catching HIV reduce. For example, in Uganda, we know that over the last 10 years, about 1.5 million children joined primary one. But by P7, you have about 600, between 600 to 650 who are completing.
Well, it's gone up now to
absolutely.
Nearly 1 million.
Yeah, so you have that over 500,000 who drop out at that stage. If you track them at senior 4, you have about 300,000. Well, we could say some have gone into vocational institutions and so forth, but we know that out of school children are so much exposed, and therefore we need to be reaching them. We need to reform the school system.
Even secondary school about double that one.
Yeah.
But the dropout is big.
So we need to reform the school system, because there's also the saying, people say children are dropping out of school, but maybe the other way to ask is, are they dropping out, or the schools are kicking them out?
Okay.
Yeah, so that and you can actually predict children. There are indicators you can look at to predict, because dropping out is a process. It doesn't happen in one day. So we want to be, for example, we should know which children are above age for their class. You want to know how many of them are consistently not attending, how many of them come from economically from very poor households, how many of them are not performing, their poor learning outcomes in literacy and numeracy. Those are very clear indicators that are early warning signs to tell you that those are potential candidates for teenage pregnancies or even becoming the next victims of HIV.
So, Benjamin Katana, you write speeches for your members in NUP. Have you included this information on the campaign trail?
Yeah, sure. Because first of all is to thank Mr. Mutebe. I hope I got the name right in terms of pronunciation.
Mutebe from the East Busoga.
For the insightful submission on this very critical but emotional subject. Because I think almost every family in Uganda has lost a person or more to this scourge. But it has also disrupted development. It has, I think, in development studies, what they would call the critical juncture that massively disrupted the trajectory. But also to note that it's part of for us, the way we look at it is that it's part of improvement of the health sector, but with key focus on that particular aspect of HIV and AIDS. Because you know, passage of time, sometimes especially on account of interventions in terms of science, there is an impression, unfortunately, in some sections that it's no longer such a threat, yet it remains a very big threat. Because if you look at statistics and they are saying that last year alone we got 37,000 infections, it's very alarming. Because even while there are those interventions, it still affects productivity, it affects the economy, the investment we are talking about in terms of treatment. That is investment that would have gone to other areas. But especially now with the shifts in global policy positions, especially in terms of funding, because most of the facilities in Uganda were largely benefiting from PEPFAR. If you look at our budget allocations, I think this financial year the health sector got about 5-point-something trillion, which represents about 8% of the budget. Way below the Abuja declaration that governments in Africa committed to spend 15% of their national budget on health. And from the communities, when you interact with people, already the cuts have affected the services they receive. At some of the centers where people go for treatment, previously they were giving them maybe treatment for 3 months. When you go today, because you see this, when you look at the poverty levels in the communities, people do not have, they have challenges of transport, even when they're going to get free medicine. So they were getting like for 3 months, now they will tell you are getting for 1 month, which means that you need more money to go, which will affect the 95, because by implication, if someone fails to get transport to go and pick the medicine, it means that they may drop off the treatment, which will affect that aspect of 95 on treatment and the aspect of 95 viral suppression. So I think the governments need to prioritize funding to make sure that the gap created by donor cuts is covered through national prioritization of funding these activities. I also think that the campaign which was adopted here and I think elsewhere of ABC needs to be amplified, because the statistics show that this is still a threat. And I know the target is to eliminate HIV as a public health threat by 2030. I think that is the target. But if we are to achieve that, then we need to amplify. And like you clearly mentioned, asked that are the political actors telling people, for example, to abstain? Are the political actors telling people to be faithful? Are the political actors telling people to use prevention, those who cannot adhere to the two? Not just the political actors, but also actors in other aspects. If you, for example, focused on our church leaders, the focus largely shifted from that. They are now largely talking about LGBTQs, because that's the conversation that the politicians have given priority, and that's what these social leaders, I don't know if they're called social leaders, that's what they are focusing on. So I think as a country we need to focus so much on amplifying that message, and but also eradication of poverty. Because poverty has an implication. If you are talking about these young people, especially the young females, some of them are being forced into relationships on account of poverty. Some are being forced into marriages. I just needed to get a clarification from Henry on the statistics. I was wondering whether the statistics which reflect that there are more women getting infected, could it be that there are more women getting tested on account of antenatal and all those, as compared to men who only go because they have chosen to go,
or when they are ill,
ill? So I just want,
perhaps it could be a mandatory test for even when you go for malaria, they check.
Maybe. Maybe. The other aspect,
your final word on that one.
The final word, of course, as we celebrated the International AIDS Day, I think one of the commitments was on about fighting stigma. Of course, in this country, we have had a unfortunate history, even where political leaders, including head of state, were engaged in stigma. You remember in some of the campaigns where he was stigmatizing some of his opponents, albeit with no information. But also now with the social media and misinformation, recently there was, and I think the person was eventually arrested, who was running, was it on TikTok? Giving lists of people, that one is HIV positive, that one is. So I think, again, on account of passage of time, there has been people have relaxed on fighting things like stigma, because I think it affects the voluntariness of people to go and seek help.
Yeah.
If they think they're going to be stigmatized.
Honorable Dombo, the Henry Mutebe has given kudos to the government, the Uganda government, for being good leaders in this aspect.
Before we get to the kudos to government, I myself want to give kudos to Mr. Henry Mutebe, because he doesn't look the wealth of knowledge that he has passed over today. You do imagine he's a very young man who may be limited in knowledge, but I'm going to share my email with him so that he can share more literature, so that I reconnect again. Because before going to Parliament, I worked in Rakai district with an HIV prevention organization called RAIN. RAIN was Rakai AIDS Information Network, and then Rakai Project Research Project, one of the biggest research programs that Uganda has had. We ran a very big program and big budget, and the face of HIV in Uganda has totally changed. At that time, there was no medication at all. Even before the prescription of Septrin to prevent diarrhea and other things, there were so many things associated with it: meningitis, poor education. And in Rakai specifically, where I was working, there were many households led by children where all the elderly people had been decimated by this pandemic. Now, when you see that there has been an effort that has brought us this far, this is a gain that must be protected, but also it is a gain that must be enhanced. As my brother is saying, that our investment and knowledge must be enhanced. Going back to what was done, Oscar, you remember Ndiulira. You remember on radios, on media houses in Uganda, they were deliberate scarecrows at that time, things that were done to tell the public that there is a problem. President Museveni keeps repeating for us that for him, he also didn't know. He had actually sent his soldiers from Uganda to Cuba for training. That's where they were first assessed for HIV. And more than 40% of the people who had gone for training were HIV positive. And that's how President Museveni was led to know that there was a public health problem within Uganda. And he did not shy away as a leader. He came out publicly to acknowledge there is a problem, and he took on a military operation in Uganda to move throughout the whole country and sound the drum for people to know, called on people to take intervention measures. And one of the biggest challenges I've had in life is when, Raqqa is predominantly Catholic, that Budu area, and we are doing preventive programs, one of which was condom promotion. And this brought me direct conflict with the church, which had a different perspective about condom promotion. Yet one of the most effective things to do at that time was use of condoms in the prevention of HIV. So here we are. The interventions have brought us this far. But when you look at the public knowledge, there is limited public knowledge. Yeah. There is also limited active campaign. Isn't it high time we went back to what happened at that in the past, also enhancing it? So that we kill stigma, but also consciously tell the public that HIV is still alive, and we need to do a little bit more for us to get to the targets that the country has set for itself, or the United Nations has set for the nations of the world. For us, as a political party, there is no better person who has done advocacy in Uganda on HIV than President Museveni. That one, even the opposition acknowledges. And
speak for the opposition as well.
Even the opposition acknowledges, and the people of Uganda on issues of public health and health generally, when you see how we have been able to contain Ebola, how we contain the COVID-19 under the leadership of President Museveni, nobody can underestimate his abilities, his knowledge, and his wisdom. The question is, can we do a little bit more, even as we do all clamor for more investment and pray for regimes elsewhere changing, so that perhaps the global perspective of the way they look at of HIV, they could look at it differently with a positive note to ensure that they prevent more people from the world from getting infected, even when the other nations are becoming centristic in the way they look at things from their own perspective. Here for us in the manifesto, we have been very proactive and shall continue to tell the public, but collectively we need to go back to the drawing board and find out how can we drum up the knowledge and the advocacy about HIV prevention without building more stigma, but at the same time to reduce these numbers to the required levels. Because how has Kenya done it to have the prevalence rates to that level, yet ours is that high? Even when we are lower than the countries like South Africa, we still believe that in order to beat the deadline of the 2030, the eradication with all zero infection, we need to double our effort in knowledge dissemination, but also fight poverty in the country. Like my brother Benjamin has said, in the previous studies, when you look at the cohorts, at the age groups, and you find out why the younger girls are getting more infected, many of these because of the sugar daddies. Because of the sugar daddies whom they befriend, who are already infected. And why do the young girls befriend sugar daddies? Because of the economic differences and the opportunities to pick a penny from the sugar daddies. So we must also tackle the economic problems so that we empower people economically. One, to be able to live a decent life, but also to be able to negotiate safe sex when an opportunity comes for it. Recently, I saw the Katikiro of Buganda. There was a clip that was moving around that the Katikiro, Oichiwa Charles Peter Maiga, was asking the women on the landing sites where he had gone to visit. And they say, without a condom, I think it was 5,000. With a condom, I think you are charging, without a condom, they were charging 10.
Yeah.
And with a condom, they were charging, I think, 5,000. And he was asking them, is your life worth 5,000? Can you risk to go on unprotected sex with somebody whose background you don't know, just because they are able to pay 5,000 extra. These are issues which we must mainstream in all our activities, so that wherever the sectors of government are, whether in the Ministry of Works, those contracting for jobs, whether in the Ministry of Trade or Transport, these trans-African drivers who go across borders, whether in the workplaces where we live, we must empower women so that they can be able to negotiate and reduce on the prevalence.
Professor Otunu?
Well, thank you very much. Let me make a confession. One is that I do many things. One of them is that I work closely with the government. And I work closely with the government on issues of socio-economic transformation, on the issue of Operation Harmony in the country.
The government of Uganda?
Yes. On the issue of Operation Harmony, that is essentially identifying root causes of conflicts, root causes of grievances, past and present, and addressing them in a way that brings people together through negotiation and harmony. And in that respect, I work closely with General Salim Saleh. So I just want to make that clear from the very beginning. That does not mean that my analysis of contemporary issues in Uganda is clouded by that interaction. So my level of objectivity remains unchanged. I think in respect to the issue we are discussing now, yes, it is important to applaud the government for the tremendous achievements in this particular respect, and the president takes a big responsibility for that. We thank him for his leadership in that respect. At the same time, and there's no contradiction here, it is important to place more emphasis on the socio-economic impact of the crisis itself. If we analyze and expose the impact in terms of the fragmentation of community, of families and societies, in terms of devastating economic impact on the families, on communities, on the country, then it makes it a lot easier for those of us who at times become observers from a distance to appreciate this particular encounter. I think it is also important, I think this has been emphasized, in a society such as ours, where we rely on external funding for most of the healthcare services, about 80%. This is not a good commentary on our performance. The first few years, when things were trying to bring together this failed state, resurrecting the state itself, we understand it. We also understand the pressure exerted on government revenues. We do understand, but it is equally important for the government not to continue embracing this narrative whereby 80% of health care budget is externally funded. Because there's a one-to-one positive correlation between the issue we are discussing now and the larger question of healthcare services in the country. And I think the government has made some achievements, and that must be applauded. But the achievement is really wanting in the area of healthcare. And if we are committed to addressing this particular crisis, we must have a fairly holistic view of approaching it. Yes, we may place emphasis on this particular issue for good reasons, but this particular issue is part of the larger issues affecting healthcare delivery in the country. So I think that certainly has to be emphasized. And I think as well, when we talk about data, and my good friend has religiously embraced the data he has given us. The data is wanting. We understand this is an approximation. Okay, the people living with HIV/AIDS in the country, the number is much bigger than what is projected for good reasons. Okay, we understand this. Okay,
you think so?
Certainly, even at the most basic level of carrying out a statistical analysis, you know it. Okay, and I think two of my colleagues touched on the issues whereby, for example, a good number of men may not show up for any test at all. The issue of stigma, our stigma also affects that. And also, it doesn't matter how well this is organized in terms of identifying who has and who doesn't have. Okay, in our society, it is a daunting task. Okay, to go from village to village, household to household, to say, well, these ones have, these ones don't have. So let us understand that the 1.5 million we're talking about is the basic the base of the number we're talking about. Okay, it's much larger, and this is simply to allow us understand that we are still confronted by this phenomenon, which requires a more concerted effort, as you clearly indicated to us. I think. Let me just finish on this issue. I spend time going to villages. What I do for the government, focusing on transforming agricultural sector, and I run into young girls sometimes, especially in urban centers. And that you have the equivalents outside of Uganda, what you may refer to as the red district. Okay, these are areas where young girl and some not very young women know that if they can.
Henry talked about it. For example, where you find sex workers.
Yes. And I asked them this similar question. I said, but you are here. Are you not scared of being infected? Are you not? Say. For us now, our main concern here is pregnancy.
Yeah.
Okay? And our main concern is pregnancy because at least we have access to some of the medication available, okay, to keep us alive. But the central issue that raising here is the pervasive nature of poverty. Okay? Maybe here and there, a handful of people may want to do it as a form of business or a form of adventure, but the overwhelming majority of them are driven to that state, okay, because of the harrowing effects of poverty itself. So when we are talking about this issue as a health care issue, we also talk about it as a question of economic fragmentation of society. Okay, the biting effect of poverty drives people sometime, okay, reluctantly to go and line up in areas where ordinarily they would not want to be seen at all. Okay, so I think it's important to bear this in mind that these are some of the invisible faces of devastating effects of economic crisis in our society.
Sure.
Thank you.
To the point that some people are not really scared about HIV, thinking it's manageable. They fear perhaps malaria even more. We're going to stop for a break, and after the break, we'll have Derek, and then get Henry Mutebe to close it out, and we go to the politics. This is the Capital Gang. Welcome back from the break. Derek Wandera, you are on microphone.
Thank you, Oscar. I think, Oscar, when you asked for someone who can speak about this matter, I, without dema or even hesitation, gave you Henry Mutebe's number, because not only is he a friend, a big brother, but I've done a lot of work with him in that line. As a journalist, I've written numerous stories about HIV in this country. Henry should tell you the latest statistics about just Wakiso and Kampala that have about 900, over and above 900 infections in the last year, which is very worrying. But the other question I've always asked, and I would like to ask you, Henry, is I've quoted the number 1.5 million Ugandans living with HIV for over 5 years. Is there a chance that this number doesn't change? I don't know. And I think it's what Professor was talking about, that probably we need to re-examine some of these figures and see to really get the gist of the matter. Each time we are quoting, we're saying over 1.5. How I hope that one day we can have maybe a lower number, but I know that if we went deep into examining and having all people checked, we know that this number could even double. But HIV is something that is a disease that has disturbed many families. I know that in each of us in this studio has either someone who is sick or has someone who has died of the disease, or some, and it's that intense. And when it comes to the economic issue and economic effect it gets, it doesn't just get to the person who is infected as a victim, but also the people around them. Certainly there is that ripple effect that they will certainly get, and it's a question that leaders need to address. And I would like to I think borrow Professor's words that looking at HIV as a health issue in isolation is certainly burying our head in the sand. HIV should be looked, but also the whole conversation should be in the bigger spectrum of things that then you do not, and I want to disagree with Henry that we should not heap a lot of praise to the government for fighting this, because I know that if it were for just the government to say we are pulling out money from our pockets to fund this HIV, probably would be we would be worse than we are. But the development partners that are around who have intentionally funded this have more praise to take than the government. Probably the government has been just on the recipient and have been recipients and on the receiving
Perhaps
end.
done leadership.
And if they bring you food every day, they bring you food which is beans and it's adding proteins and you're growing fat, you won't say as a family that I am the one who has provided for it. They have given it to you. You have no choice but give it to the people who are in your family. So yes, they've provided leadership. Thanks, but we look at the entire bigger picture of health management systems in the country, and we have a reason to say there is need for better.
Thanks, Derek. Today's examples have been very strange. You have growing fat on beans. I don't know how that works.
Yeah,
but coming back to you, Henry Mutebe, to close out this discussion, I have Norman Magembe on X, formerly Twitter, asking why has it taken a long time to get an HIV vaccine? You answered Benjamin's question on the efficacy of injection, and you've explained why it seems expensive now. In Uganda, for example, which ones are the high areas of HIV prevalence?
Okay. Thank you so much, Oscar. Quite a number of things to respond to, but in terms of the regions,
you may not need to respond to all.
Okay.
But
in terms of the regions, it is very diverse, geographically diverse. But we know that the concentration is mostly here in the central region at about 7.7%.
In Kampala.
Yes, not Kampala per se. In fact, when you look at the data, Wakiso has, I think, about 180,000 persons living with HIV. Kampala is about just 70 something. So it's not really, but it's clustered as South Uganda. Then the regions that are really low is West Nile, 2.3% prevalence, Karamoja about 1.3%. There are even districts in the Karamoja region which are 0.51%. So the data is there actually. You can track how each district is doing.
It would make sense. People in Karamoja don't have time to do those things.
Yeah, it's very diverse, and of course there are reasons why this region in particular has that kind of. The Ankole region has quite a problem in terms of, for example, Fort Portal City has about 14%. That's quite a high prevalence. And in terms of the statistical confidence for this data, obviously research and data, there's always that confidence kind of issue. But there is a lot of studies so there is a lot of triangulation of data. You have data you're picking from the facilities for people who are being tested. You have disease surveillance. You know that we have Center for Disease Control. They randomly pick samples of these blood samples and try to, run analysis to survey just randomly what is going on. So there are ways of triangulating this information and ascertaining the degree to which they are accurate. And then the question on why we've stuck at 1.5. So when you look at the annual AIDS-related deaths, right now we are at 20,000. So out of the 1.5 million, because we've been successful with putting them on treatment, they are not dying. So for some time you're going to have the same. But also you are reducing on the number of new infections. So if we remain, for example, at 37 for the next 10 years, we won't even hit 1 million, another 1 million. So roughly it will always be around there. So we've reduced from between 2010 and 2024, the reductions have been about 63% in 61 in new infections, but in deaths 63%. So when you look at that data, it kind of gives you an idea why we have kind of stuck at that point. But also the other thing I wanted to talk about was around adolescent girls and young women. I think that like the professor said, HIV or AIDS is a product of a failure in systems from the family. Because if we asked ourselves how many of us have talked to our children about HIV in the last maybe 3 months, you find 1 or 2. And also the prevention messaging needs to change because, the epistemology of the young people is different from ours. Their worldview, the way they think is different. The media they are consuming is different. So even the message we are giving must be different. Before we used to say AIDS kills. Now, if you meet an 18-year-old now and say, have you met a person who is living with HIV or who has AIDS? They'll tell you have not seen. Or have not seen a person dying of HIV because people are dying of non-communicable diseases, diabetes, cancer, and so forth. So it means that the messaging that we used, that you will die, you have bad manners, that it won't work. So it means that we also have to reform the prevention messaging. The prevention strategy has to change. But also we have to confront, like I said, if we have a snake here, we have to be calm and know that it has been here with us. And not scramble, because when you scramble and rush, it can get irritated and actually strike. So even for these people that are being, criminalized and they are going under. And while there, we are not sure whether they are just having sex with men only or they are actually having vertical and horizontal sexual transactions. So no one is safe if there is any person that's being left behind. If you get a sex worker and put them in prison, you cut down on the continuity of care. There are sex workers who are rounded up in some of those suburbs. They are put in prison. She was on treatment. And because of that, she's not going to adhere and she's going to fail on suppression of the viral load and she can transmit. So I think these are issues we need to accept. And that's where the president was really spot on in terms of saying we have a problem here. We have to face it. That denial is what has kept South Africa and many countries in the Sub-Saharan Africa too. So, but maybe lastly...
Yes, I was going to say, final word. Mr.
Yes.
Henry, what are you leaving
finally,
to us and the listeners of the Capital Gap?
Yes, I think also... I think we need to, in terms of financing, last year, the research is showing that the global contributions to global health reduced from about $49.6 million to about $36 million because of the executive orders. But also other countries are going down. And for example, the Global Fund, which is a very big support of the health response in Uganda, their target for the next round of 3 years was about $18 billion there was a replenishment conference that took place in South Africa last month, and they targeted to raise 18 billion, but they have only been able to raise about 11.3 billion. So it means that looking ahead, the funding is going down. So we must start resourcing our health care system from the domestic finances. And I like what Mr. Dombo said, that and I think Katana, that the leaders need to start talking. We need to start engaging our communities and reminding them that the scourge is still around. We need to take care. Men need to go and seek support. These days you can actually take your medicine and you live a reasonably good life. So we want to thank those leaders that have been able to pass on the message, but we encourage them to do more. Even the opposition, we encourage everyone to be passing on this message. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Henry Mutebe. I have Nora Owaraga here talking about the areas that have Western Island and Karamoja have significant enforcement that discourages sex with unmarried young women, and perhaps that helps. So thank you so much for the information. As Emmanuel Dombo said, for a young man, you're very informative.
Mr. Dombo suggests that information should only be for the old.
Well, Crispy Kahero did say that Professor Otunu is a very knowledgeable old man, so perhaps it's in that order. So on to the politics. I'll start with you, Professor Ogenga Otunu. And you said you work with Salim Saleh. That is incredible. That there's an Otunu who works with Saleh. It is unusual. So congratulations on that one. And General Salim Saleh has spent time in the north. So how are the NUP people faring in the north? Are they complaining about brutality and violence and poor access to the masses over there as well, or things are running smoothly? And then we've seen some social media posts that have not been very kind to Norbert Mao. Or will he win anyway, despite the small following we notice on social media?
Well, thank you very much. I think you're doing your work very well. That is to be very provocative. Let me say one thing first. I work closely with General Salim on a number of programs, and essentially work with the government. The main focus of our interaction was to do with developing a coordinated, a comprehensive program for the post-reconstruction of the Acholi sub-region. And that was embedded in a program which became Special Presidential Initiative, Parish to Market Socio-Economic Transformation of the Acholi sub-region. And work actually is rather interesting. The conflicting perception of General Salim, who he is. I had met him casually, not working together with him, and over the years that we've been working together, I think people in the north and more so Acholi sub-region can attest to this, that even the perception of the government has changed over time. And perception has changed over time in part because of what the government has been able to deliver in the area, but also by the interaction with General Salim, who was engaged by and large in a very harmonious way of resolving conflict, the conflicting land issues, for example, bringing different parties that are in conflict together, mediating and settling issues in the area. The same thing has happened in the Kapeka area, where there's land confliction that has taken place, effectively under General Salim Saleh. And so for me, when I was a student at Makerere University, I worked with the government of Obote. I also worked with all the major political parties that did not want Obote to be in power. Okay, so that's the position I take. I am objective If I find an area that of interest that I can work with the government on, I work with the government on that issue. Now the position of NUP, I think my brother will speak more authoritatively to that in the areas of, especially in northern Uganda, in the Chole sub-region. What I know for sure, and this is what we all understand, is that the political terrain defined largely by the Constitution allows any political party that is registered to participate effectively during this period. And unfortunately, here and there are situations where certain political parties are not given the space they should have to effectively negotiate and reach out to the people. NUP has been not in northern Uganda, more so in the Chole sub-region. The NRM is very strong. And the NRM is very strong because in the post-conflict environment, a number of issues have been negotiated with the government. The more people understand the president's position on using affirmative action effectively to address economic disparities caused by years of grievances, of conflict, the more people begin to appreciate the contribution of the government. The irony, though, in the context of the Chole sub-region, is that the NRM as a political party is benefiting from the popularity of the president. As a political party itself, it does not have a strong root in the society. That doesn't mean it's not going to win the election. It will win the election. Okay, it has not built the type of roots deep enough in the soil of that area to survive on its own. It's surviving largely on the performance, on the perceptions people have about President Museveni, not about the party itself. So the party is benefiting from that. When it comes to NUP, NUP, which is a new party, did not have any a strong presence in the area because it's new. The parties which had strong presence in a Chole sub-region for a long time had been the Democratic Party, Uganda People's Congress Party, and then with the NRM in power now, the NRM has been there. NUP is a new experiment in the area. Nonetheless, because NUP has been able to touch on fairly basic issues which people associate themselves with. Okay, sometimes you refer to this as kitchen table issues. Okay, access to healthcare, access to quality education, affordability of what people need, food and the like, and people who find themselves left out of this major experiment because the NRM operation has made some tremendous achievements. But the achievements have not reached every part of the society and have not reached at the same level. When you talk about the GDP, for example, you're maybe focusing on someone like Professor Otunu, who might be getting about 200 million a year. Okay, someone in my village there can barely. The reality of his or her life is not reflected on the numbers we're talking about here. So NUP has been able to reach out to people who feel, for a variety of reasons, based on that definition, the allocation society, excluded or left out. Okay. So and in terms of demographic composition, these are largely younger people. And you have a lot of young people who have dropped out of school or who have not gone to school, who gather in various centers, and NUP was beginning to appeal to them. Now, those who thought they were trying to protect the president and protect the NRM, some of them, and in my opinion, I think these are people who are not schooled in the gutter politics. Gutter politics is different from the theoretical, abstract, thinking about politics. Okay, gutter politics is where you go into the dungeons, where politics takes place. Now, in that context, there were those who thought they were protecting the president and protecting the NRM. who then went completely against the constitution, went completely against the electoral guidance to harass and intimidate members of NUP. In their mind, by intimidating them, by harassing them, they will prevent the potential supporters of NUP from voting for NUP. What they don't know in practice is that by harassing members of NUP, because some of the members of NUP are and are very few actually in numbers in the Acholi sub-region, there were people who would go to, for example, to Bobby Wine's rally to see him for the first time, okay, to hear him out, and then figure out whether or not they can support him. Okay? Now then, if you harass those people who actually may be, and the majority of them would vote for the president, I can tell you this, okay? You harass them, you turn them against the president. You turn them against NRM. But but the operatives think that they have to protect the president, they protect the NRM. And this is a very sad commentary. One, it is in violation of the constitution. Two, it violates the electoral laws, okay? And three, it fractures our society. Bear in mind that what we refer to as Sevenomics, the key ideological and practical ideas of transforming our societies, as espoused by the president. One of them emphasizes the need for Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism itself its building block is from the villages here in Uganda. If there's no Pan-Ugandan movement, Pan-Africanism, which we talk about whether in the context of East Africa or the continent itself, is a hollow, okay, and meaningless project. What that means, therefore, is that we should, those of us who want, and I'm one of them, I want the president to win this election. I want him to win in part because of the type of things we want to get done to transform society at this particular juncture. I may change my mind tomorrow, and I have the right to do that as a Ugandan. Okay, those of us who want the president to win have a big challenge to speak directly to those who think they are government operatives, who violates the constitution and the law, and harass members of opposition at this point. Not to stop doing that. And NUP is undergoing that to some extent in the Acholi sub-region. I was not taken aback because I've been in Acholi sub-region. I had the opportunity to speak to some of the security people and also senior administrators in the Acholi sub-region on the same subject you're raising, okay? Whereby I told them, I said, look here, to protect the gains, to promote the president's view and in the area, and to some extent the NRM itself, okay, focus on the unintended consequences of what you do. And I saw it yesterday, for example, some police officers in Noya, okay, are breaking up essentially NUP's rally, allowing some people who claim to be members of the NRM, okay, from interfering with NUP's rally, okay. And I understand where we're coming from, and let me just explain this way. During the colonial period, for example, the colonial agents who happened to be black people were more brutal than the Europeans. Their brutality had to do with the fact that they want to demonstrate to the Europeans how loyal they were. Yeah. Okay? And I understand what is happening because, for example, Bobby Wine goes to the area where my president comes from. Okay? The president doesn't tell people to line up and block him from campaigning. He doesn't. Okay? But then Bobby Wine goes to Acholi, and you have one or two operatives who think they are defending the president and the president's interest, who then begin to harass. And this is not approved by the president. Okay?
Yeah, okay.
And my brother who sits here, who works for the government directly for the party, I'm sure can attest to that. That these are people who want to and so in essence, NUP is having a hard time in some parts of the Acholi sub-region.
Okay.
people are being harassed.
Yes.
Okay? And my brother, who is a member of NUP, and a leader in that respect, can speak to that.
He's the treasurer.
Okay.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
You have.
Can I just finish one thing? Because you asked the question about my brother Mao. Only 1 second.
We need to stop for a break first.
Okay, thank you.
Norman Magembe says when you hear Kano Magezi compare NUP to Al-Shabaab, you get worried. And then Kwasiwe says, Professor, you don't need to repeat your comment on if you have integrity, it will come through your words. You don't have to explain your engagement. Then another one, Joe says, delink your engagement with General Saleh from NRM campaigns. He's non-partisan, so he claims, and has even complained that NRM people do not support him when he's accused of land grabbing, and he hopes that Bobi Wine will at least support him on that one. So let's stop for a quick break. Welcome back from the break. This is the Capital Gang, still receiving messages regarding the World AIDS Day. Interesting. Keep posting them on X, formerly Twitter, as well. So, Derek, you've been to northern Uganda. Some people are saying Professor is spot on. Others are saying there's a David Mulabi here who is saying his analysis is flawed because opposition is illegally not allowed to mobilize. So you've been in the same area. What say you?
Interference with his campaign rallies. I saw in Iganga, for instance, which was last week, I was there, where 3 people died, actually. The police reported 1, but I know for sure that on ground, a 7-year-old was trampled on by a stampede of when the police started and the military started shooting live ammunitions, while 2 others were actually shot down dead. The same had happened in, I think the only district I saw in the last 2 or 3 weeks that were peaceful was Jinja. Jinja, where Bobi Wine spent the night, was guided to all his 3 rallies until he drove out of Jinja and went to Iganga. And actually, I met with the RPC, Mr. Saba, and I told him he did a very good job in guiding and protecting the people and making sure that there is no one who is hurt in that kind of situation. But Iganga was a mess. It turned around. No, it was on the same day. It turned around in just a flip of an eye, and the military came into action, started shooting almost aimlessly. We were in the spot where they were shooting, and we didn't know whether to leave or to stay in the cars. And the shooting, the bullets were flying over our heads. And before we knew, we saw some 2 people collapsing down dead. But
where was this?
That was in Igang. Yeah. But that has been the kind of for a person who is covering the trail of Mr. Kyagulanyi for the second time. I know that this has been the situation. Even in 2021, it was actually worse. More people died in 2021 because of Kyagulanyi. We remember, of course, the 1819 massacre on the streets of Kampala and other parts of the country. And our questions, even when you want, as journalists, we are taught to report with fairness, balance, and factually. And now, when we report certain things and we are called out by some government officials, we wonder where fairness eludes us when we are saying that the camp of Mr. Kyagulanyi has been attacked by the police or these people wearing NRM T-shirts. In Kiruhura, for instance, people wearing NRM T-shirts just waited and just entered into the group, the rally, and started punching people and hitting them with canes and stuff like that. And you'd wonder, so then where does the law come into play? The Electoral Commissions Act, the parliamentary and presidential elections, but also even the Constitution about someone holding a rally and then another party just comes to interrupt if really these are people from the NRM and the Honorable Dombo could actually help us shape that picture. Where does the law, where does then the police come in to quell such situations, other than protecting and trying to massage the people who are coming? So what's happening in the northern Uganda is what has happened in the west, is what happened in the east, and what's almost happening everywhere. Yeah. Especially on the Chagulanyi camp. Yeah.
Benjamin Katana of NUP, apart from experiencing that violence, I don't know, have you been able as NUP to present some issues? I have Nora Oraga, who sends me a daily update saying still issues have not been presented. The president did not do very well in a presidential debate, and so on.
Yeah, first of all is that for us, we have an action plan, especially on areas we believe require affirmative action in terms of development, in terms of inclusion in the economy and the development trajectory of the country. And the northern Uganda, and particularly actually sub-region and some other parts like Karamoja, which have been, because when you look at the data in terms of poverty levels, in terms of children that are dropping out of school and things along those lines, you realize that there is a need for structured intervention. And that's why we are suggesting affirmative action that is intended to elevate these regions to the level of development as other parts of the country. What has been happening is that even in terms of, and that's why you see the NRM does not want us to campaign or mobilize in these regions, because they know they have created a desperate population, and but they want to keep it under the, to create an impression, and as articulated by the professor here, whom I'm worried his objectivity that he has emphasized so much may be eclipsed by his association with the group that is responsible for what I'm talking about. That they want to create a wrong impression that the region supports NRM on account of the achievements. But when you look at the statistics, there are no achievements. And the debate normally is that, no, we are looking at it in terms of where we have come from. But where they have come from is also on account of the same government. The displacement of people into camps, and the attendant and development that has happened, even the land conflicts that are happening now that the NRM is pretending sort of a creation of the NRA, a creation of the NRM. So if you want to cause transformation in a region that has been ravaged by war, you don't do it through PR. You do it through deliberate structured interventions. 20 years from now, what is going to influence the development of northern Uganda is education. But if you look at the dropout rates, even if you looked at the statistics of government, you realize that in some places it is up to around 60%, 68% in some districts. If you look at but also the schools and what are the driving factors? It is hunger, it is poverty, it is child labor. So where are the specific interventions of government in addressing these areas? But all you see is the casual and unstructured presence of Saleh in the region. And all these delegations going there, the only advantage that can come from that are the hotel bills that people are paying. Government is paying for people who are sleeping in hotels, waiting to line up and meet him. But if you look at the schools, for example, where are the interventions? The traditional schools, the public schools, Sir Samuel Rebecca, and the rest, how are they faring under the NRM? Where are the interventions to make sure that they reclaim the position so that the children in this region can be able to compete with the children in Uganda, with the children in Ankole, and other parts of the country? Even if we talk about infrastructure development, where are the interventions? So, what the NRM has mastered is first of all the PR through the presence of Saleh, but also the handpicking of a few individuals from northern Uganda to be able to give their PR legitimacy, so that they are part of the plan to change the trajectory in this region. But our position is that for affirmative action to be meaningful, it should be structured, it should have parameters, and it should be part of a national conversation, so that it is not a speculative arrangement between a few individuals. When it is met, you cannot know. When it is not met, you cannot know. But when it is a structured intervention, and previously there have
and there'll be accountability.
Yeah, and there will be accountability. Previously there have been interventions through the office of the Prime Minister, but most of this money has again found itself in pockets of individuals. And if you go on ground, there have been things like restocking, but money spent. But if you go to these communities, the cows are not there. And that is why, for a very long time, they do not allow the opposition to mobilize in these areas. The other day, about 2 days ago, our office in Guru was attacked, again by the NRM people, guarded by security. You saw what happened yesterday in Amuru and Noya districts, where our rallies were disrupted by people who are putting on shirts of ghetto structure. You know very well that the ghetto structure is supervised by Uganda Police Force through General Damulira. You have seen him addressing them, so it is official. It's not that we are speculating. And there's another one called Major something, I forget his name. So the disruption is not an act of indiscipline on the part of a few individuals. It is part of the grand scheme of the NRM to make sure that they keep those communities desperate, to think that their survival depends on the NRM, and they don't allow other actors to access this region, do mobilization, and build social consciousness that would empower the people of northern Uganda to be assertive and demand for what is due to them as citizens of this country.
Okay. Emmanuel Dombo, you've had all round illegalities are decampaigning the NRM, and it is noticeable that you've also noticed the example you gave of Noya.
Oscar, the transformation that is taking place in northern Uganda is real. And to those who don't know, the political landscape shifted. And it forced the members of parliament who were hitherto in the opposition, and they even elected parliament under different parties, it moved them to shift. When you see such very reasonable and understanding people shifting, it's not an act of looking for opportunities, because after all, even getting elected, they were not elected by NRM. They were elected under opposition. But when they're in parliament and they realize that this is what the society needs and this is the narrative now happening on the ground, they decided to shift and moved with the population. So that is a positive remark that the leaders themselves in northern Uganda have demonstrated, and we cannot take it for granted, and for us to welcome them very much to be part of this growth trajectory. Secondly, my brother Benjamin acknowledges that a region that has been ravaged by war, that's an acknowledgement that for a very long time northern Uganda was not real, was not part of the development process that was happening. One time we had to go there with the Speaker of Parliament, the Right Honorable Edward Sekandi, then to visit the camps. I'd never been to an IDP. And at that time we were debating in Parliament whether northern Uganda should be declared that should be an emergency situation so that we can attract foreign assistance in order to deal with the issues that were there. Parliament eventually passed that motion, but that change of perception came in because members of parliament had traveled and gone to that area. After the transitioning from the war to recovery, the main narrative there was government was going to take your land, everything was going to be stolen, and doing many things in the area where the political narrative is totally against. It is riding against the tide. So even where a government ought to have done many things in transformation, it lacked allies. Because many people who are in the opposition had concentrated on telling people the lies when they were benefiting themselves as individuals. But right now, we have a semblance of acknowledgement of what government is doing. We have leaders of northern Uganda willing to work with the government in order to bring the transformation. It is true, there have been thieves in the implementation of government programs, not only in northern Uganda but throughout the country. And this should be dealt with under the structured forms of government, where they must be dealt with the anti-corruption agencies, because they are there. Why shouldn't they be dealt with? But in northern Uganda, when you go and you see the economic activity transformation taking place, when you go to Nwoya specifically, I was in Nwoya, and I tried to acquire land in an area called Nyamukino, only that somebody who tried to sell me land, he didn't tell me I was near a game park. And when I planted my maize, the elephants came and ate all the maize, 100 acres. And I've since sold that land to somebody from northern Uganda because I couldn't meaningfully utilize the land.
I hope you won them.
Like I'd wanted, and it's something that hurts me. But also, my understanding of land use has changed. I now believe more of hiring land than buying land. That creates a better relationship between the landowner and you, because you'll not be threatened that you'll be there permanently, and you can be willing to see this land for a period of time, and when you finish using it, you leave, and both of you part in friendship without necessarily. And also, buying land may lock up a lot of resources which you may need for development. So these are issues, economics, which you want people who have known to go and teach our people how best it can be. But the politics that was witnessed yesterday on the media houses, it is totally uncalled for. NUP does not have support in northern Uganda that can warrant that somebody should mobilize either, I will not call them goons because I don't think they were, but mobilizing mobs of people to go and interfere with the rally. That is not NRM. Because I saw people on yellow t-shirts interfering with Chagulanyi's rally. That was not totally uncalled for, and it was uncivil. Somebody should investigate that matter and really tell us what exactly happened and who incited those young people into doing that. Bob Wine has been in many rallies. We were with him in Omoro during the by-election. He came and moved throughout the district and exited. And when we went to elections, their candidate performed dismally. So even now, Bobby Wine, what we must acknowledge, whether we like it or not, that this young man is a celebrity. He has been a celebrity in the arts world, that wherever in Uganda Bobby Wine goes, he will attract crowds. Those crowds do not necessarily transform into political support. Because in Kisoro, the other time during the by-election, he attracted one of the biggest rallies. But their candidate did not even raise 1,000 votes in the by-election. So,
How do you persuade your people to follow that advice? Because even when you look at the nominees they have a very serious gap in that if they
could not nominate for all positions in the country.
If they won all their seats, they
will have to borrow They will have to borrow support from NRM in order to run government. So, given that for us now the president has done about 96 rallies yesterday. That was about 96 districts. We are remaining with about 40 districts to conclude the campaign. The period we have covered is bigger.
Yeah.
We have moved on moderately well. And this campaign should not be...
a helicopter help. So.
Should not be distracted because of the bad behaviors of some individuals. And purely because some of them may think that what they are doing, they are trying to impress the president or impress the leadership of NRM. I don't think that is being helpful. They should leave the leveled ground so that we don't give the opposition excuse, even when we defeat them, for them to begin relying on those fake excuses that they are the reason that they are defeated. But it should be that the government has done a lot of work in northern Uganda and the political landscape has shifted.
Professor Otunu, we only have like minutes left. In 2 minutes, the Mao question, because...
Okay. let me just answer the Mao question and touch on something within a minute. One is that the political terrain in the Chole sub-region has changed over time. A while ago, when my brother Mao had just joined politics, and for a long time, Mao was the face and the voice of Acholi. Things have changed a little bit now. For a variety of reasons. There is more movement towards the NRM in the area. Mao goes back, is still popular, but is also confronted with new issues. One is that the cooperation understanding with the NRM was not clearly articulated and explained to the people in the area. He's trying to do it. He has a very reasonably strong opposition from Father Onen, who was an independent, who curved the territory, the area where Mao is standing today. It is likely, in my opinion, that Mao will still win. And I'm being straight here because it's my friend. But beyond him being my friend, my main concern, partly why I work with the government in the Chole sub-region, is to make sure that we have access to the government and access that can make a difference on the ground to address some of the grievances and issues which my brother has raised. Now, let me go to a different issue here.
In just a minute.
Yes. It is a painful reality for us who live in a society torn apart by war for over 20 years. It's painful in the sense that when we bend backward to accommodate those who were at war with us, the rebels, the government, okay? When we do that, then all of a sudden at some point we say, wait a minute, but it was this government that created a problem for you. Let us assume for a second that the assertion is true. I'm not saying it's true. Let's assume for a second. The question then is, tell us, where were you? Where were you when our people were in the camp? Because you are now talking about things that happened in the past. We have been backward. We are now accommodating different views and position in the government. The government is also bending backward to accommodate us. You tell us, where were you when our people were dying in the camps? Which streets did you get onto and demonstrate to the society?
This question is to whom?
No, pardon?
That question of where were you?
To Benjamin.
No. My question is now to those who think
Benjamin didn't exist at that time.
But that's the whole thing. But that is the whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
The question should be addressed to.
No. Look, the way I'm posing the question here is that this is a continuum. Well, we are talking from things that happened in the past, which we are talking about today. Okay, so you tell us, in terms of those views, where were you when our people were dying in the camps?
Thank you, Professor.
And so when we bend backward based on our reality, okay, I think people should be a little bit careful in their judgment. The final point here is part of the situation, the crisis in northern Uganda has to do with corruption. Corruption that comes from our society and others outside the Chole society.
Okay.
Part of it has to do with poor implementation of government policies on the ground.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you,
we understand the problem.
Allow two more.
Thank you.
Benjamin, looks like Professor is ripe for recruitment to your party.
Yeah, I think the question
just
of
copy everything he has said.
The question of where were you confirms what we have been saying, that the person who pushed the people of Acholi to camps, the person who created the situation that is affecting the progress of the community, is the person now they are associating with, and they are blaming those who didn't demonstrate. You should at least begin by blaming the one who is responsible for the situation that you wanted people to demonstrate against. But away from that, my brother Emmanuel Domba and NRM cannot be bragging about support when they are even scared of competition. There is no support they have in those areas, and that's why they do not want other people to go there and mobilize and build structures, because this destruction, this sabotage is not just happening in the campaign program, but previously, prior to these campaigns, we have had our leaders in that region arrested, we have had our offices closed, and when our teams arrive there to do any small activity, they are picked up. And I have seen someone called Aguma, I think, where you tagged me, saying that for me I have not been beaten, but I think he has selective memory, or he loves to cherry pick, because I'm sure you saw a video where he was being assaulted. I don't know. I don't think I had committed any of the crimes he says the NUP people commit, because what happens is that these people come and beat people randomly. They pick people randomly. It is politically motivated. It is not enforcement of law. That's why even when they arrest people, they cannot progress with the trial. They just keep them in a detention for a long time without trying them, because they know the charges are empty and fabricated, but that are only aimed at disadvantaging NUP and the opposition.
Okay. Let me have Jay Kwandera. Final word. I hope it will be a safe final word.
I'm always safe. Away from the politics, I think the security so far has behaved fairly well on the journalists.
Away from the campaign.
No. Even within the campaigns, at least we have not been directly brutalized like we saw the case in Kawempe and the other time. And I hope it continues that way. I hope that the police and the security continue to see us in that element of being the fourth estate, but also just informers, people who are passing on information.
Thank you, the listeners of the day. Thank you, the panelists, the gangsters of the day. Honorable Emmanuel Umala Dombo, thank you. Mr. Benjamin Katana of NUP, thank you very much. Derek Kwandera, the journalist, thank you. Professor Ogenga Otunu, thank you for your observations, comments. Henry Mutebe, program officer, gave us lots of information. Star Cafe for powering the gang. S6 exams concluded this week. There are now adults out there. The festive season is here. Take greater care, as Moses and Alan told you this morning. And next we have Rough Cuts by DJ Nyowe. I am Oscar Semoyam Soke signing out, and I'll see you next week.